apparently Braum is here, and yeah, no, I gotta take a look at that, cause I was assuming that Braum would show up eventually. He's a very popular character. League of Legends tries to put him in everything they possibly can. He was in the Ruined King game for some reason, like very strange character choice to put in there, but just because everyone loves Braum, and he's also kind of a natural fit for a fighting game, I think, because like his primary method of attacking people is like melee attacking them with punches and like swipes of his big shield, and that's like a known fighting game archetype, right? Like the character who is big and chunky and has like the big object that they use as their primary means of fighting. So like, yeah, I kind of assumed that the Braum was going to turn up sooner or later. I didn't think he would be a launch character, but hey, I'm not complaining. Let's see. JB LeBlanc. That guy has got a lot of work out of Riot. My word. Interesting that there also seemed like this is very slight, right? But they're doing right, it's very slight, but they're doing a bespoke trailer for him. Like in terms of like they have the character set up and they do like a little custom animation thing to sort of show. I don't know, maybe that's part of his. Is that part of one of his supers? I wouldn't think so. Like, this seems to be, like, bespoke animation created specifically for a trailer, which I don't think they've really done so much before. Which, okay, interesting. Like, that's a step up in production quality on the sort of pre-release material that they've shown us so far, which I guess makes sense since they're gearing up for the open beta thing. Of course I've signed up for it. Of course I have. Interestingly, some change in his proportions as a character also, by the way. So Braum has had a series of, like, he's had a series of different character designs and different things that he's shown up in. They've really kind of buffed him up for 2XKO. Like, that is bigger, and that's certainly more chiseled than Braum usually appears. Usually Braum tends to be a little bit more soft around the edges. Like still a circus strongman, but like not so much the Dorito shape, right? Like not so much the really, I don't know what they're called, lats or whatever, like the wings on the thing like really bulging out. Not so much these really chiseled, like deep, dark, like super pronounced washboard abs thing. That's not really Braum's thing traditionally, and his proportions have also changed. His head is very small in comparison to his body here, like very, like almost Hulk levels. Like this is a character design thing, right? If you want a character to look like they are just as huge as physically possible, make their head small relative to their body. Like it makes the muscles, it makes the size of their body just stand out that much more. It's a common way to create characters that are supposed to feel huge, big, overwhelmingly powerful, or like really tough and strong, like a wall of flesh. It's very noticeable on Braum. He looks like he's got small head mode enabled a little bit. Which is like they've definitely like changed his character. Also that cloak, he doesn't really usually wear a cloak, I don't think. They've definitely messed around with his proportions and his base character design a bit. Let's see, hang on. It also looks like the visual style of 2XKO has... It's congealing more and more as time goes on. Do I have a higher resolution than 1080? Thank you. No, I don't want to see the description. YouTube, please. It does look very pretty. Like, this would be like a beach in Bilgewater or something like that. That looks like Buru. Construction back there, so this would be like Ilawi's stage. Look at those gorgeous painted clouds in the background, because like the other Bilgewater stage, right, which is like inside the bar, that was very cartoony in the way that it was put together. This, on the other hand, this is much more painterly. Like this is much more like soft edges and much less like sort of like cell shading. Much more painterly, much more, like, cinematic landscape kind of thing, which is interesting, because, like, I would have expected a style like that for Ionia also, but I feel like my memory of the Ionia stage is that it's also kind of very sort of cartoony, cel-shaded kind of thing, so I wonder if this is, like, a placeholder stage of some kind, or if they're sort of shifting the way that they do the backgrounds. I wouldn't mind if they did, because, like, one of the things I felt a little bit on watching a lot of 2XKO footage is that the characters don't really separate from the background as well as I would like sometimes. Like, sometimes it feels like it gets a little visually noisy, where I feel like this painted style of background has much better separation with, like, these hard cel-shaded characters. Also, it's a little, maybe a little uncanny, I don't know. In motion, it probably looks fine. Let's see. Yeah, in motion, it's fine. Wait, no, that was too good. Okay, so this would be like a duck attack, and he fucking does an uppercut by doing a one-finger push-up. That's too good. And then, like, he juggles the shield over and, like, does a shield lift. I mean, come on, that's fucking perfect. Holy shit, I love that. That's great. Oh, that's wonderful. That's absolutely perfect for Braum. I mean, just, and there was also, God, oh man, I might need to download this to go through the animation. And, like, a couple of slams that look like sort of more regular. This is the price of going up to 1440, is that YouTube is real slow when it comes to framing through it. But then, that one, where he sort of puts the shield beneath himself and then just literally flexes as he, like just, Braum is having a lovely picnic up in air. Is that like a grab in the air? Like where he sort of grabs the opponent and just slams them to the ground? It kind of looks that way. Ooh! Oh. And then that powers up his shield. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, he's so happy. And it's just like, yo, oh. That looks nasty, man. Yeah, he has the block. Oh, it's the Mighty Poro! Oh, that's nice. The Mighty Poro coming in from Legends of Runeterra. And the fluffed! Wait, that fucking ruled. Hang on. Oh, the animators are having fun with this. I need to see the variation on every character in this cutscene. So that's the Poro fluffed from Legends of Runeterra details making it into. Oh, that's sweet, because those are Poro snacks as they're rendered in Legends of Runeterra, same as they're rendered on the Howling Abyss. But that's the Poro fluffed specifically. That's excellent. Brilliant. Good. This actually is an aesthetic thing that I'm quite... Because, like, I don't mind when characters are beautiful and sexy. And certainly not a character like Ari, who's, like, explicitly a seductress. So, like, that works for her. There is a tendency, though, in certain kinds of, like, fantasy art, especially fantasy game art, where yeah, you make the character beautiful, glamorous, sexy, whatever, and then you become like the work becomes unwilling to ever distort them out of that, right? Like becomes unwilling to ever make them give them stupid faces or distort their proportions for comedic effect or like mess them around, right? Mess them up in any way, because like there is this priority in the way that the aesthetics are handled that prioritizes keeping the beauty, keeping the glamour at all costs, where you wouldn't really get a character making like a wild bug-eyed expression like this when they get punched in the face. I'm very happy that 2XKO is like allowing for a little bit of that aesthetic flexibility where a character like Ari can get clocked in the face and look silly, right? I like that. That's good. I want to see this cutscene with every single one. I want to see what every single character looks like when they're getting punched in the face by a Poro that's trying to go for a snack. Because that's personality. Like that, when the game is willing to break the glamour for the sake of a comedic impact, like for the sake of like making a point or making something land, I respect that so much more. I respect that so much more, and I enjoy that so much more than games or like just art in general that like insists on no, the glamour is inviolable, like the glamour cannot be broken for anything, which like Hoyoverse. I think maybe Zenless Zone Zero has some more variation on that one. I haven't really taken a close look at that game, but like especially a lot of anime art and like sort of mainstream typical style, but also certainly Western fantasy art. Like I didn't think that 2XKO was going to do it with the characters, because Riot itself is a company that has a high priority on like glamour, beauty, keeping things clean at all times, in a way that I find really sort of aesthetically stifling. But I'm very pleased to see that like they are allowing for silliness, for comedy to take aesthetic priority over like other parts of the character design. That's good. And also it's just really funny.
Good friends.
The little flex. Wait, he can throw a Poro? Is that like a taunt move that does like 1 damage, but if you kill someone with it?
Guy, unless you make trouble.
Hang on, I need to see this whole thing. I was pausing the whole way through. Let's just watch the whole thing through. Also, for those who don't know, in the Ruined King RPG, Illaoi outright propositions Braum for sex. She's outright, hey, do you wanna, like, we have some time before we have to go confront the bad guy. Do you wanna go? And Braum, sort of like a bashful teenager, sort of goes, Miss Illaoi, very flattered, but not ready for such commitment is Braum. Which I let myself believe that maybe this is because Braum is canonically a romantic asexual. I think that would be lovely. I think it would kind of fit with his character. That like those things just kind of don't enter his world, and the way that he sees himself. But it is a thing. Like they have a strong friendship from their adventures in Bilgewater, and Illaoi has expressed very openly a strong attraction to Braum, although she respects that he does not reciprocate. I cannot get over the fucking 1-finger push-up and then, like, the shield lift. That's great. That's wonderful animation for Braum. That's really good. I like that a lot. And, like, they're really leaning into the showmanship of Braum here also, which I quite like. That's one thing. Braum, as he was originally conceived, was based in large part on circus strongmen, right? Like on performers, on like these like big strong men who perform with muscle, right? Like who like do circus tricks, and like he has like idle animations in League of Legends itself where he like spins his shield on his legs like it's a ball. Sort of in a sort of classic sort of circus like act sort of thing. I'm really pleased to see the animation for 2XKO lean into that a little bit more, because there are times, I'm thinking of the Nunu game, I'm thinking of certainly also like Ruined King, where they didn't really lean into that goofy performative aspect of Braum so much. Right? Where it's more like he's still a lighthearted character, but like the whole circus performance thing, right? Like the whole Braum is showing off muscle, right? Like that part really sort of wasn't emphasized as much, certainly in his animation or in his character design. 2XKO, being a fighting game, I suppose, has a little bit more like allowance for that kind of levity, and I'm really pleased to see them leaning into that with Braum. Like, he's not a complete comedy character, right? But there is that, like, this is a guy who, like, when he's going off on a thing, it's a performance. Like, he's showing off because he is Braum, the greatest hero of Freljord, right? I like that. I like that attention to detail. Looking at his character design too. I think I said a couple of minutes ago, let's watch the whole thing through without pausing, and then I didn't do that. The way that I am as a person. Like, so he's got this cloak here with like this big fur. I kind of like that as a character design piece. Like, I kind of like that better than the mostly naked torso he usually runs around with. Like, one thing Braum has always kind of been missing in his character design is some sense that he's like a Freljordian whose fashion aesthetic includes a whole bunch of fur, right? Like, that's one of the basic sort of fashion components of Freljord aesthetics, is these huge tufts of fur everywhere. That's always kind of been missing from his base design. With Braum, it makes sense, because again, he's a circus strongman, right? Like, part of his personality is showing off how impervious he is to the cold, right? So, like, for him, it makes sense that as a costume, he would choose, because he is iceborn, he has a lot of cold resistance, that he would choose to deliberately go around with, like, less clothes on than he needs to sort of demonstrate Braum is hero of Freljord. No storm can stop Braum. Right? Like, that makes sense for him in a way that it doesn't for a character like Ash, for example. Or even, I would argue, for a character like Tryndamere, who is not an Iceborn, or Olaf, who, like, have that same sort of, like, shirtless barbarian thing going on. Well, not quite shirtless with Olaf, but you know what I mean. Where it kind of doesn't really make sense so much for them, because, like, that, why would that be part of the character? Like, why would they do that for no good goddamn reason? That doesn't really align with who they are as people or what they're trying to do with their personalities. But I do, like, I have always missed, for a long time, like, I have missed the presence of fur as, like, a baseline, this is just what clothes look like in the Freljord thing. So, like, I kind of like the cape over the shoulder, because it retains that thing of, like, he's deliberately choosing to go bare-chested. And that's one thing, by the way. Iceborn in League of Legends, this is a very annoying misconception that people have. They are not immune to the cold. They are incredibly resistant to the cold. Like, they can walk through a blizzard, like, wearing a shirt, like, just a shirt, and they'll probably be okay. Like, they won't, like, get frostbite on all of their limbs and lose, like, half of their face. But they're not immune to the cold. They can still be harmed by it, especially the cold that is generated by lots of true ice, for example. And, like, they can still be exhausted by the cold. They have limits, right? So, like, I just in case anyone starts bringing that up in the comments, because they are not immune to the cold, they are resistant to it, there's a difference. But I like that, like, he has this thing, because, like, the cloak also helps with the wrestler aspect, right? Like, with the aspect of the performer. That's part of the reason why, by the way, that's part of the reason why superheroes wear capes. Well, not so much anymore, but that they used, like, that used to be, like, the visual signifier of a superhero is a character who wears a cape, is because wrestlers used to wear capes. Wrestlers and strongmen in the circuses and stuff like that used to wear capes, because they were, like, big flashy pieces of clothing, like, billow in the wind and show off. It was, like, good stage performance costuming, right, for them to wear that. And so when superheroes were being designed in the comic books, when they wanted a visual shorthand for this character is very strong and very powerful and, like, fights bad guys, capes were sort of pre-established as a visual element that communicated to the audience, oh, this is that kind of character. We need to think about this guy kind of the same way we think about a wrestler, right? A wrestling face. That's why Superman wears a cape. Like, that's where that comes from. And so, like, I think it makes sense on Braum here as well. It's a showy piece of, like, clothing. It's not very practical, but it's like, it allows him to have that connection to the aesthetic grounding of the Freljord, at the same time as having something that's kind of flashy and showy over his shoulder that sort of reinforces like his performer archetype. I like it. Like, I think some parts of his character design have maybe overcomplicated a little bit. Like, I think the straps around the gloves there are maybe a little bit extra. Same thing with like the buckles on his shoes, because like, what do those leather straps and buckles do exactly? I don't think they're like, they're not. The boots don't open down here. Why does he have them? Some design details here are maybe a little bit too much. But not in a way that's like incongruous. Like, that's pretty normal for fighting games, that you make the character design extra, right? Like, you don't really go for subtlety in fighting games, so that's fine. Anyway, this time for sure, I will grab myself by the scruff of the neck. Let's watch the whole thing uninterrupted.
Braum time! You get the horse! The little ones! Hey! Whoop! Like Braum! Nice! Whoa! Total fight! It's that time! Friends!
Every variation. I want to see every variation of that fucking super cutscene.
Braum is
I want to see every single character getting decked in the face by a Poro. I need this in my life. Please. It's a very expressive version of Braum as well, which I'm very pleased about. Because Braum is like, he's a larger than life character. He's extremely expressive in like the way that JB Blanc performs Braum. Very expressive, right? Like, that's always like very loud, very broad, very out there. I like that they've clearly put a bunch of animation bones into the face that allows them to really sort of, like, to give him some strong expression, right? That's another thing, like, again, not to harp on, like, anime aesthetic games too much, but, like, compare and contrast with the level of facial animation complexity you often get in, like, an anime game, anime fighting games, especially, I'm thinking of. These faces, the way that they're constructed, seem to be able to do a lot more in terms of their expressiveness than you would usually, and I'm saying usually, get. Like, even, like, when I say anime fighters, I'm primarily thinking of, like, Arc Sys fighters. I'm thinking of, that, what the fuck's that game called? Shit, that might actually, no, that's probably an Arc Sys fighter, too. It's the Grand Blue thing. Like, a lot of those, when I talk about, like, games that prioritize the glamour, right? Like, the glamour over all other aesthetic considerations. Those are the kinds of games that I'm talking about. Like, where you have, like, a lot of fighting games, you will have, like, the designated comedy character, like Faust in Guilty Gear, for example, who's, like, that's the character who's, like, allowed to go hog wild and have all the crazy shit going on, but then every single other character is, like, very sort of restrained in the way that they're put together. I do like that, like, they took the trouble to make, like, to give Ari, like, the derp face when she gets punched. I do like that, like, we have a certain level of expressiveness in the other characters as well. I do wonder, because, like, we know that they've been working on the roster they've already revealed for a long time. Like, Jinx, well, we haven't seen much of Jinx, have we, since the reveal? We've barely seen anything, I think. Like, Echo, Yasuo, Darius, Ari, like, Illaoi, they've all been worked on for a long time. I don't feel like I've seen quite as much expressiveness from them, and I do wonder, like, to the extent that they're building this thing kind of as they're going along, right? Like, how much refinement there's gonna be in terms of, like, can the original rigs for someone like Darius, do they have the same level of animation bones, or did they custom make that specifically for Braum so that he could have a greater level of expressiveness? Because that would be a sensible thing to, like, Darius is a very serious character. He's not gonna need most of the time to be able to have a broad range of expressions. He's gonna need to scowl and look serious and angry. Like that, those are like his main three emotions. I wonder if Darius is created with like the same level of plasticity, the same level of expressiveness available to him. I'd be curious. I'd be curious to find out. Release some fucking behind-the-scenes footage about like your animation process, Riot. I need to see. Maybe I could get in touch with someone. I know a few people on the 2XKO team. Maybe I can sneak away to talk to some of their animators about it. Anyway, that's consideration for later.
Friends.
Yeah, like, yeah. Right? Like, the way that he, like, squeezes one eye closed. Okay, I'm gonna have to take the resolution down a little bit so I can frame by frame my way through this a little faster. And, like, you can see his mustache, right? Like, the mustache tilts because he's squeezing this side of his face together. So, like, the mustache sort of tilts relative to the angle of his head as well. And is being used as part of his expressiveness. That's good. I wonder how much he can move his mouth, like, up and down the face. Because, like, his mouth must be tied very closely to the mustache, and the mustache is kind of tied to his nose, so they probably can't distort it all the way down, out, away from the... Well, they probably can, but they probably won't, like, as a stylistic thing. Oh, the squash and stretch, the anticipation. As it gets flattened into a pancake and then the gaboing launched off his muscle. That does the little doing. Sound is going to sound awful for a second here, but let's just have a look at this in slow motion. Okay, let's turn the sound off. Yeah, that's brilliant. Like, Braum will be the super armor character, right? Like, clearly. There, like, that little thing. Like, pay attention to his mustache. As the Poro jumps up on his shoulder, proposes the plan, pay attention to the side of the mustache. Right? You see how the mustache moves up, and that gives you the expression that you can, even though you can't see his mouth, a smile is spreading because the mustache is, like, mobile and part of his expressiveness. I really want this to be a move that Braum can do that does, like, 1 damage. So that it's, like, that's the move you use to finish off an opponent, like, to really sort of stick it to them. Lots of good attention to Braum's key poses as well. Like, they look great. He looks wonderful.
Unless you make trouble.
And, like, props to the animators who've been, like, not only working on Braum as, like, a character, but, like, that little introductory scene was, like, yeah, that was, like, good visual, like, nothing elaborate. It's not something I'm gonna do a 2-hour animation breakdown about, but, like, just, like, a good little baseline, like, establishing the relationship between these two characters. Braum puts a hand on her shoulder, and she's immediately reassured and happy to see him. It's like, oh, that's good visual storytelling. And, like, I'm glad that the models that they're using for 2XKO are capable of doing that. It's one of those things that makes me wonder about, like, the level of story mode we can expect from 2XKO. I would not expect any kind of a story mode upon whatever the initial launch is. Like, I think this thing is going to be effectively in early access for a while, before they actually sort of publish it to any kind of like this is the real 1.0 thing. But I do wonder like the extent of like, is it just going to be like a Marvel versus Capcom thing where you fight X number of battles and then you get like 2 screens at the end that sort of goes, and then Braum went back to Freljord to fight as champion, blah blah. Or if there's actually going to be some kind of narrative thing, a story mode that you can actually follow. Because if there is, like, then is that like, is this level of like intro animation, is that like sort of, can we expect like that we go into a battle and we get some sort of introductory cutscene where it's like your main that you're playing, like you choose to play Braum for the story mode, and then you go through and you go to this stage, and here you'll have like Ilaoi on your team, and then like go to the next stage and you'll have like someone else on the like on your team fighting against other people for some, with like little intro cutscenes like this, like that would be interesting, like, because that leads to the possibility of scenarios where it's like Ilaoi is missing like half of her health, and you need to like stall the fight or whatever until the red bar recovers enough that you like something like that, like scenarios like sub objectives. That would be interesting for a story mode. Like, I wonder if this is like sort of previewing that they have a bunch of animators working on this kind of cutscene to use as fight intros for a story mode, or if it's just the animators who were working on the characters had a little bit of extra time on their hands and just did this for the promotional thing. Who knows? I will say, Braum would never beat up Echo. Like, I don't think he'd ever do it. Like, because Echo is a kid. I don't think he would be capable of doing that under normal conditions. But hey, it's a fighting game, so we gotta beat up some teenagers. So that would be his grab, then, it looks like. I'm so happy to see the Mighty Poro. It's like, it's the Mighty Poro from Legends of Runeterra. Aww. I'm really glad that got brought. Like, I really am genuinely very glad that the things that Legends of Runeterra has sort of brought to the League of Legends universe are getting to stay, right? Like, that other parts of the brand are like the writers and artists who work at other parts at Riot are committing to keeping some of those things alive, because Legends of Runeterra is... Riot has basically put it on life support. Like, that seems to be like they've sort of given it like the minimal viable number of staff to sort of keep the thing going, but they're clearly not committed to pushing that game any further. So I'm just glad to see that that doesn't mean that all the innovations that Legends of Runeterra made are just sort of disappearing from the characters. Braum still has his Mighty Poro. We still have the Poro fluffed.
Friends.
I do note that I'm not hearing his champion theme anywhere in his music here. Like, we're not hearing da 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 da. Which, like, I don't know how far along they are with composing for 2XKO. They've revealed some tracks, which, as I was listening to them, at least I couldn't identify any snippets of, like, champion themes from the main game in there, which I wonder about. Like, are they going to create new themes for the champions specifically for 2XKO? And if they're doing that, like, are they gonna completely, like... Because, like, if you put Pantheon, as I'm assuming that they will put Pantheon in this game, it seems like that doesn't seem like a thing you can just not do. If they put Pantheon in this game, like, you gotta have the la la da 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 da. Like, you have to have that, right? Like, you can't not have that. And much in the same way, I kind of feel like with Braum, you kind of can't have Braum without la da 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 da. So I wonder about that. Like, I don't know. Because, like, who knows, like, whether the track that appears in this video is even going to appear in the game, or if it's, like, a licensed track that they use just for this particular trailer. Who knows? I really like the look of Braum in this game. I really like what they've put together here. Like, there's some things, like, I kind of wish he wasn't so jacked, right? Like, I wish he wasn't so fucking yoked, with, like, all these really... Because, like, Braum is, to me, at least in my mind, he's more of a... He's not so much the bodybuilder type, he's the strongman type, right? And strongmen tend to, like, tend to have, like, really big, thick cores, but not really, like, bulging muscle. Not really, like, those big, like, sharp, drawn shapes on them. They tend to be more, like more thick, in their proportions. But, yeah, like, I do feel a little weird about how sharp his muscles look here. I feel like Braum, and this is also a part of his character, right? Like, Braum is a very soft man, ultimately, right? Like, he's built like a brick shithouse, but he's a very soft, sweet, gentle man, right? Where I feel like a little bit of, like essentially a little bit more body fat, right? Like, rather this 0% sort of skin stretched thin over his muscles sort of thing, would make a little bit more sense for him character design-wise, than... like, this very ripped, like, very, like, I feel like that's a little incongruous, but that's a nitpick. Like, that's just one of my bugbears. I understand the visual language of it, right? Like, this is the visual language that we're used to when we think of what does physical strength look like? Well, it looks like a bodybuilder, right? Except, even though, like, when it comes to actual feats of strength, bodybuilders aren't really the strongest people in the world. Like, they are pretty strong. Like, they can lift some shit that I couldn't ever possibly lift. But when you look at the people who do, like, actual feats of strength on, like, an Olympic level, like weightlifters, wrestlers, shot put, hammer throw, those kinds of things, this isn't the body type for that, right? Like, this isn't really the body type for someone who, like, really does a, like, powerful feats of strength on a performative level. It is much more of a superhero anatomy, this. It's a much more of a wrestler anatomy. Like, this is very WWF, right? Or WWE. When was the roid era in American wrestling? That was the 90s, right? I can't remember what the league was called back then. This is more that, right? Like, this is more the Arnold, like, bodybuilder, yeah. It's more that kind of aesthetic, and I kind of wish they would lean a little bit more into taking a bit more inspiration from what strongmen actually look like. But they're doing it because this is the visual language that we have. Like most people, when they think, what does a strong person look like? They think it looks like this, even though in reality it kind of doesn't. So I get it. It's just, yeah, I feel like this very hard lines, very angular muscle aesthetic here, because I think it makes more sense on Ilawi, who also seems to have like a little more of that thick core thing going on. Like, not that Braum is thin around the waist. It makes a little bit more sense on Ilawi, I think, as like a part of sort of like, well, even on Ilawi, actually, I kind of wish, and it's maybe just a 2XKO thing, I'm not really a fan of the 2XKO style of like rendering muscles in this like very geometric, very sharp edge, like with the hard shadows thing. I think it looks a bit naff, but that's me personally. Like, that's not really criticism of the game, that's just me personally. I kind of, I feel like a different aesthetic of strength might have worked a little bit better. But oh well, fuck it. It doesn't matter. That's a personal nitpick. His animation looks great in this game. That's really the thing that I'm very impressed with. The way that they put his moveset together. The way that they're handling him, like, as a personality and not just as a force on the battlefield. That, like there's so much of his humor, so much of his, like, internal joy. Like, he's just so happy surfing a shield across Yasuo's face. Yeah, this is good. I really like this. Like, I have my nitpicks, because I always do, but his key posing is also often really, really strong. Like, when he hits, right? Like, when he hit, like, look at that, like, that snap, then straight down with the legs. So you really get that sense of, like, a spring uncoiling itself as he's, like, stomping on the shield to, like, smash things up into the air. Like, some really strong key posing with Braum here. And also this, like, this little cannonball thing, right? Like, which again has that air of, like, the circus strongman sort of doing an acrobatics trick. Like, look at those key poses. Like, they're really fucking strong. And that's where the anatomy, like, the choices for the anatomy, like, to have that really powerful Dorito-shaped, like, upper body, like, that really wedge-shaped thing, like, where you can really use that, bring that in terms of, like, really get, like, a strong key pose for his motions. Like, that's another reason to exaggerate anatomy, right? It's like you can create these more exaggerated animation poses, like, to really sort of hammer a point home about the character's personality or how they relate to the world. This is good. Man, I don't know that I'm going to be playing 2XKO with any kind of competitive spirit, because I don't really have much competitive spirit. I don't care that much about beating people at competitive games. Like, it's just not one part of my motivation, but I'm going to spend some time in the practice tool just looking at the character animation for sure. Assuming they must have a training room, right? They must have a little training practice room with all the frame data and shit. Presumably, I'll be able to go in there and slow the animation down or something like that. I would very much like to. Give me a model viewer for 2XKO. I would really like to inspect these things and their animations in detail. Anyway, I think that's the reaction. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably it. Braum looks cool. Bye.